Welcome to Horror Echoes. Here, every photograph is a doorway, and behind it waits a story nearly erased by time. If you'd like to hear it through to the end, please leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. And now, take a close look at this frame. Some documents are classified because they contain information that threatens national security. Others are classified because they hold information that would embarrass the people who wrote them. And then there are documents classified for reasons that no one in the chain of authority will ever truly put into words. Reasons passed from one administration to the next, from one department to the next, the original justification long since forgotten or never recorded at all. These documents remain secret simply because they were once classified, and because in the decades since, no one has wanted to be the person who decides to declassify them. The survey report filed by the Putnam expedition in May of 1885 belongs to that third category. It was sealed 48 hours after the survey team returned from a cave system in Letcher County, Kentucky. The order came from the Department of the Interior, signed by an assistant secretary, whose name appears on that order, but on no other document connected to the matter. The report itself, along with all field notes, photographs, sketches, and personal materials produced by the four-man survey team during their 7 days underground, was transferred to a federal storage facility in Washington in June of 1885 and has remained there ever since. It has never been released. It has never been declassified. And as far as the public paper trail indicates, it has not been formally reviewed since 1923, when a routine retention audit confirmed the file existed and recommended that its classification be maintained. The cave itself was sealed in July of 1885, 2 months after the team's return. The work was carried out by a small Army Corps of Engineers detachment under direct orders from the Department of the Interior. The seal, a wall of mortared stone closing the cave's main entrance, designed specifically to prevent re-entry without significant excavation, has been continuously maintained since 1885. A perimeter around the cave site was established at the same time, marked by survey stakes and, in later decades, by a chain link fence with periodic warning signs indicating that the area is federal property and that access is forbidden. The fence has been replaced 4 times in the 140 years since 1885. The signs have been updated, and on at least 3 documented occasions, the stone seal has been reinforced when erosion or shifting terrain compromised its integrity. Somewhere, someone considers it important that the Letcher County cave remain closed. That much is on the public record. What is not on the public record, what was sealed along with the cave in 1885 and has remained sealed for nearly a century and a half, is what the Putnam survey team found when they went inside. Until now, here is what we know about the survey itself from the documents that were not classified: the contract documents, the personnel records, the routine administrative paperwork that accompanies any government project, and that, by virtue of being routine, escaped the broader sealing order. The survey was contracted in March of 1885. The Department of the Interior had been receiving reports from coal speculators in eastern Kentucky about a potentially significant coal deposit in the mountains of Letcher County, an area where the geology was complex and existing surveys incomplete. The local terrain included an extensive cave system known to settlers since the 1820s, but never fully mapped. The department wanted a professional assessment of the coal potential and a basic geological survey of the cave system itself. The contract was awarded to the Putnam Geological Survey Company, a small firm based in Louisville that had done similar work on previous government contracts. The company was owned by a man named Dr. Theodore Putnam, age 58, who had been a professor of geology at the University of Louisville before starting his survey firm in 1872. By all accounts, he was a competent and cautious geologist, the kind of man whose surveys were detailed and whose conclusions were conservative. He selected 3 men to accompany him. The first was his second-in-command, a younger geologist named Wendell Marsh, age 34, who had worked with Putnam on 3 previous government surveys. The second was a topographer named Samuel Whitfield, age 42, who specialized in cave mapping and had produced detailed surveys of cave systems in West Virginia and Tennessee. The third was a laborer and field assistant named Joshua Kane, age 26, who handled the equipment, the field camp, and the physical work of the expedition. 4 men, 7 days, 1 cave. The team entered the cave on April 11, 1885, and emerged on April 17. They spent the following 3 days at the field camp finishing their preliminary notes and packing their equipment. They left Letcher County on April 21st. They arrived in Washington, where they were to deliver their report directly to the Department of the Interior on April 28th. The classification order came down on April 30th. By May 2nd, the entire surviving record of the expedition, the official report, the field notes, the maps, the photographs, the rock samples, even the personal letters several team members had written during those 7 days at the field camp, was in federal custody and was formally no longer available to anyone outside the Department of the Interior. But 3 members of the team had done something before they reached Washington. They had submitted personal accounts to the Kentucky Historical Society in Frankfort. The accounts were submitted on April 22nd, the day after the team left Letcher County, during an overnight stop in Frankfort on the way to Washington. They were submitted separately and without coordination, as far as anyone has been able to determine, by Wendell Marsh, Samuel Whitfield, and Joshua Kane. Dr. Theodore Putnam did not submit an account. The Kentucky Historical Society in 1885 was a small organization that maintained a regional archive of historical materials, including personal papers, letters, and the kinds of accounts that ordinary citizens occasionally felt moved to provide. It accepted such submissions routinely. The 3 survey team members' submissions were filed under their respective names in the standard archival manner and were not connected at the time to the larger story of the Putnam expedition, because that story was not yet known. They sat in the archive for over 100 years. In 1988, the Kentucky Historical Society's archive in Frankfort suffered significant water damage when a storm flooded portions of the building. The damaged materials were sent to a recovery specialist for evaluation. 2 of the 3 survey team accounts, those of Wendell Marsh and Samuel Whitfield, were among the materials recovered. They were returned to the archive in 1990, restored to readability, and entered into the catalog under their original designations. The third account, Joshua Kane's, had been filed in a different section of the archive, the section for personal papers donated by ordinary citizens rather than materials related to specific historical events. The cataloging system used in 1885 did not cross-reference these sections. When the flood damaged the archive in 1988, the materials in Kane's section were less affected than those in the Marsh and Whitfield sections, and his account was not flagged for special attention. It was returned to its original location. It sat there for another 25 years. In 2023, an estate sale in Lexington, Kentucky, included the personal papers of a deceased local historian named Margaret Ellsworth, who had spent the last decade of her life. She died in 2022 at age 87, researching the unexplained classifications of 19th century federal documents. Her notes, in a box of materials sold at the estate sale, included references to the Putnam expedition and to the existence of 3 survey team accounts at the Kentucky Historical Society. The buyer of the box, a researcher named Daniel Trent, contacted the Historical Society and, with their permission, examined the section where Kane's account had been filed. He found it. It had been there for 138 years, in a folder marked simply, Kane. Joshua, Personal Papers, 1885. Trent transcribed all 3 accounts in early 2024 and made them available to a small number of researchers. This is the first time they have been read together, as a single body of evidence, in the order in which the 3 men experienced what they experienced underground in Letcher County in April of 1885. Wendell Marsh's account is the longest of the 3 and the most technically detailed. He was, after Dr. Putnam, the most senior member of the survey team, and his account reads like the work of a man aware that his observations may eventually need to stand up to professional scrutiny. He records measurements, distances, geological features. He describes the team's progress through the cave system in the methodical prose of a trained surveyor for the first 3 days underground. His account is unremarkable. The team mapped the primary chambers of the cave, took rock samples, and established a base camp at a junction approximately 2,000 feet from the entrance. The cave system was, Marsh wrote, larger than preliminary reports had suggested. A network of interconnected chambers extending in multiple directions through limestone and sandstone formations, with several promising indications of coal deposits in the deeper sections. Marsh notes one detail from those early days that, in retrospect, he found significant. The cave system showed signs of having been entered before. Not in the geological past by water and slow weathering, but recently in human history. There were faint marks on the floors of some of the upper chambers, suggesting the passage of feet. Smooth pathways through dust that should have been undisturbed. If the cave had truly been unmapped, there were in 2 locations marks on the walls that Marsh initially took for natural mineral deposits, but that on closer inspection appeared to have been made by hands. Smudges of ash, perhaps from torches, dark areas where something had been wiped or struck against the rock. The cave was supposed to be unexplored. The cave was, in fact, used regularly enough that traces of human passage had accumulated on its surfaces, even in the upper sections accessible from the main entrance. Marsh wrote, I noted these observations in my field book at the time. I did not raise them with Putnam, because I assumed they would be addressed when we completed our survey and could review the findings together. I did not in those first 3 days attribute any particular significance to the traces. People had been in the cave before. People had presumably mapped the upper sections, even if no formal map had been produced. This was unremarkable. The Letcher County area had been settled for nearly 70 years by that point. The notion that local people had been in and out of the upper cave was unsurprising. It became more significant after the events of the 4th day. It became significant because the marks of human passage in the upper sections were not the marks of casual visitors. They were the marks of regular, sustained use over years, perhaps decades, perhaps longer. And whatever was in the lower sections of the cave, whatever the survey team found in the chamber and the passage in the lit room beyond, was not separated from the surface by an impassable barrier. It was connected to the upper cave by passages that had been walked repeatedly by feet that had left their marks. Whoever had been using the lower chamber had been coming and going freely for a long time through a cave entrance that the federal government, 2 months after the survey, would seal with a stone wall. On the 4th day, the team pushed into a previously unmapped section of the cave that descended at a sharp angle to the southeast. This is where Marsh's account changes character. He wrote, at approximately 400 in the afternoon on April 14th, though it should be noted that time becomes difficult to track precisely once one is more than a few hours into a cave system. And our watches had begun to disagree with each other in ways I attributed at the time to the magnetic properties of the surrounding rock. We entered a chamber that I will refer to here as the lower chamber, for lack of a better designation. Putnam had us stop to take measurements at the entrance. The chamber was large enough that our lanterns could not illuminate the far walls. The ceiling was high, perhaps 30 feet at its peak. The floor was relatively flat and covered in a fine pale dust that I initially took for limestone powder. It was not limestone powder. Whitfield was the first to recognize what we were standing on. He had spent more time in cave systems than the rest of us combined. And he understood before I did that the substance underfoot did not have the chemical character of limestone weathering. He suggested we collect a sample and continue the survey of the chamber. We did so. It was approximately 20 minutes later that we found the markings on the walls. Marsh's description of the markings is careful and clinical. He does not speculate. He describes what he saw. He wrote, "The markings were carved into the walls of the chamber at heights ranging from approximately 3 feet to approximately 12 feet above the floor. They were not random. They were arranged in a pattern that suggested deliberate placement, vertical columns of symbols regularly spaced, extending around the entire perimeter of the chamber and up into the alcoves that branched off from the main floor. The symbols themselves were not letters of any alphabet I recognized. They were not pictographic in the manner of Native American rock art. They were geometric, angular, precise, executed with a degree of consistency that suggested they had been made with metal tools by craftsmen over what must have been a considerable period of time. Putnam was by this point visibly disturbed. He had recovered one of the rock samples we had collected at the chamber entrance, the pale dust, and had examined it under the lantern, and had reached a conclusion that he shared with us in a low voice. Marsh records what Putnam said next. The dust on the floor of the chamber was bone meal. Pulverized bone, ground or weathered to powder, accumulated in a layer covering the floor to a depth of several inches. Putnam estimated that, based on the area of the chamber and the depth of the layer, the volume of bone represented thousands of individuals, accumulated over an unknown but likely very long period of time. Marsh wrote, "I want to be clear about what I am writing. The chamber floor was covered in the powdered bone of what appeared to be a great many people, accumulated over what Putnam estimated as centuries. The walls of the chamber were carved with symbols of a kind that none of us could identify, executed by hands that had clearly been trained and that had clearly been at work in this place for a long time. The chamber was approximately 2,000 feet underground, in a section of the cave system that, according to all available information, had never been mapped or explored. Someone had been using this chamber for a long time for purposes that involved both writing on the walls and the deposition of a great many human remains. We did not know who. We did not know when. We did not know whether they were still using it. We established that question quickly. There was a passage at the far end of the chamber, descending further into the rock. Kane, who was the youngest of us and, in retrospect, perhaps too eager to demonstrate his usefulness, volunteered to scout the passage briefly. Putnam allowed it with strict instructions to go no further than 50 feet and to return immediately if he encountered anything unusual. Kane returned in approximately 10 minutes. He was running. He did not speak for several minutes after he reached us. When he did speak, he said only that we needed to leave the chamber, that we needed to leave the cave, and that we needed to do both as quickly as possible. He would not at that time explain what he had seen in the passage. He simply maintained that we had to leave. Putnam, to his credit, did not argue. We left the chamber within 5 minutes of Kane's return. We made our way back through the cave system to our base camp at the upper junction, and from there to the entrance by the most direct route. We emerged from the cave at approximately 10:00 that night. We did not re-enter the cave for the remaining 3 days of our scheduled time on the site. Putnam used those days to complete the reports on the upper sections of the cave and on the coal deposits we had identified before our discovery of the lower chamber. He did not include the lower chamber in the official report. He instructed us not to mention it. I am writing this account now because I do not believe that what we found in that chamber should be entirely lost to the historical record. I am submitting it to the Kentucky Historical Society, where I trust it will be preserved without immediate broadcast, and where some future person, someone I hope with more knowledge than we possessed about whatever it was that has been carving symbols and accumulating bones in a chamber 2,000 feet beneath the surfaces of Letcher County, may eventually be able to make sense of it. I have not asked Kane in the days since our emergence what he saw in the passage. He has not volunteered. I do not believe I want to know. Samuel Whitfield's account is shorter than Marsh's, but more precisely focused on the question that Marsh's account raises and does not answer. What was in the chamber besides the bones and the symbols? Whitfield was a topographer. His professional life had been spent in the careful documentation of underground spaces. He had a trained eye for detail, and he had, as he notes in his account, a particular awareness of the small environmental signals that indicated whether a cave was dead or whether it was in some sense currently in use. He wrote, "I noticed when we entered the lower chamber that the air was not the air of an unused cave. Cave air in spaces that have been undisturbed for long periods has a specific character. It is still. It carries the particular mineral smell of slow water and stone. It is, in a sense, difficult to describe to anyone who has not spent time in caves. Dead air. Air that has been sitting in the same place for so long that it has acquired the quality of something stationary. The air in the lower chamber was not dead air. There was movement in it, faint but present, a circulation of some kind, suggesting either an opening to the surface that we had not yet identified, or, and this was the possibility I noted at the time but did not raise, a source of warmth somewhere in the chamber that was generating convection. I also noticed, when I examined the bone meal more carefully, that not all of it was old. The deeper layers were heavily weathered, broken down to the consistency of fine flour. The top layer was different. It was coarser. The fragments were larger. Some of them retained recognizable shape. Pieces of long bones, fragments of skull, what I believed to be a portion of a human jaw. The top layer was recent. I do not know how recent. I am not a forensic specialist. But I am familiar enough with the rate at which bone weathers in cave conditions to estimate that the most recent additions to the chamber floor were at most a few decades old, possibly more recent than that. This was not an ancient site. This was not a place that had been used in some distant prehistoric period and then abandoned. This was a place that had been receiving deposits within the lifetimes of people currently living. I want to be clear about what I am stating and what I am inferring. I am stating that the bone fragments in the upper layer of the chamber floor showed less weathering than would be expected if the chamber had been unused for more than a few decades. I am inferring from this observation that whatever process has been depositing human remains in this chamber has continued into recent memory. I am not in a position to say how recent. last year, last decade, last generation. Only that it is not ancient, that whoever or whatever has been responsible for the chamber is not a population that vanished centuries ago. They are, in some operational sense, still active, or were until very recently. I am also stating separately that Putnam recognized this. He examined the bone samples with care. He sorted the fragments by their condition. He held one of the larger pieces. A fragment, I believe, was part of a temporal bone from the side of a human skull. Under his lantern for a long time, he did not say anything. He set it down. He instructed Kane not to collect any further samples. I believe Putnam understood at that moment exactly what we were standing in. Whitfield's account continues, with his observations of the symbols on the walls. He confirms Marsh's description, geometric, angular, executed with metal tools, but adds a detail Marsh does not include. He wrote, "I noticed, while Putnam was examining the bone sample and Marsh was sketching the wall arrangements, that some of the symbols had been executed more recently than others. The carvings in the deeper sections of the chamber, on the older portions of the wall, were weathered. The edges of the cuts had softened over time. The surfaces within the cuts had developed the same patina as the surrounding rock. The carvings near the chamber entrance, the ones closest to the passage by which we had entered, were sharper. The cuts were cleaner. The surfaces within the cuts were in some cases almost fresh. I would estimate that some of the carvings had been made within the past 5 to 10 years, possibly more recently." Whitfield's account ends with his agreement with Marsh that the lower chamber should not have been included in the official report, but his reasoning is different. He wrote, "Putnam's instruction to omit the chamber from the report was, I believe, the correct decision, but not for the reasons he gave us at the time. He framed it as a matter of professional caution, that the chamber's contents were too unusual to include in a routine geological survey, that we lacked the expertise to characterize it, that further investigation by appropriate specialists would be required. I believe the actual reason for his decision was simpler. I believe Putnam understood in the chamber that the people who had been using it were still using it, that they would return, that the survey team was, for the duration of our presence in that part of the cave, intruding on an active site, and that the prudent course was to leave quietly and to ensure that whoever was responsible for the chamber did not learn that we had been there. I have not raised this interpretation with Putnam directly. I do not intend to. He is a careful man, and I trust his judgment in matters of professional discretion. I am submitting this account to the Historical Society because I believe the record should reflect what we observed, even if the official report does not. I am asking that this account not be made public during my lifetime. I have not yet decided whether I want it made public after my death. I am leaving that decision to the Historical Society's professional judgment, with the request that they consider the matter carefully before any release." Whitfield died in 1907. His account remained sealed in the Historical Society's archive until it was rediscovered after the 1988 flood. By the time it became publicly accessible, the question of his preference about its release had become moot. The Society released it in 1991, along with Marsh's account, in a brief notice that received no significant attention. Joshua Kane's account is the shortest of the three and the most direct. He was the youngest member of the team, the laborer, the man whose role had been to carry equipment and set up camp rather than to perform geological work. He had less formal education than Marsh or Whitfield. He had no professional vocabulary to draw on, no training in the careful framing of difficult observations, no institutional incentive to soften what he had to say. He wrote what he had seen. His account, transcribed in 2024 from the original held in the Kentucky Historical Society's archive, reads as follows. I am writing this because I think someone should know. I was the only one of us who went into the passage past the bone chamber. Mr. Putnam said 50 feet and come back. I went about 30 feet. I came back faster than I went in. The passage went down. It got narrower. There was a smell I did not recognize and have not smelled since. But that I knew, when I smelled it, was the smell of something living. I came around a turn in the passage, and there was a chamber on the other side. It was smaller than the bone chamber. It was lit. I do not know how it was lit. There was no fire and no lantern. The light was a kind of pale glow that came from no source I could identify, and that did not flicker the way fire flickers. The chamber had a low ceiling and a packed earth floor. There were things in the chamber. I'm going to describe them as best I can. There were people standing in the chamber. I will use the word people because I do not have another word. But I do not believe they were people in the way that I am a person. They were the right shape. They had heads and bodies and arms and legs in approximately the right places. But they were not standing the way a person stands. They were not breathing the way a person breathes. I do not believe they were breathing at all. They were facing the wall opposite the passage I had come down. They were not moving. There were perhaps a dozen of them, maybe more. I did not stop to count. They did not turn when I came around the corner. I do not think they noticed me. I had the strong impression that whatever they were doing required their full attention, and that whatever was happening in that chamber was not going to be interrupted by something as small as me. I will try to describe them more carefully because I do not know if anyone else will ever see them, and I want what I saw to be on a page somewhere. They were tall, taller than a person. I am 5'9". The ones I saw were closer to 7 feet. Some of them perhaps taller. They were thin, not starvation thin, proportion thin, as if that was simply how they were built. Their arms were longer than a person's arms. Their hands, where I could see them at their sides, had more fingers than a person's hands. I am not sure how many. I did not look long enough to count. I had the impression of more than 5, but I cannot swear to it. They were not wearing clothes, but they were not naked in the way a person without clothes is naked. Their skin, if it was skin, was the same color as the chamber walls. A pale, dry color, neither white nor gray, nor any color I had a name for. Their heads were shaped wrong. I am going to leave it at that. I do not have words for the wrongness, and I have tried for several days now to find the words. And the words are not there. The shape of their heads was not the shape of a person's head, and I do not know what it was, and I do not want to keep trying to describe it. I stood there for what was probably only a few seconds. Then I turned around and went back up the passage to the bone chamber. I told Mr. Putnam we had to leave. I did not tell him what I had seen. I have not told anyone what I saw before today. I am writing it down now because we are about to deliver our report in Washington, and I have a feeling. I cannot explain it any better than this, that the report is not going to be the full story of what was in that cave. I have a feeling that this part is going to be left out. I do not want it to be entirely lost. I am leaving this account with the Historical Society in Frankfurt. I am asking them to keep it safe. I am asking them not to do anything with it, unless someone someday comes looking for it. I do not know what was in that chamber. I do not know who or what was standing in it, or what they were doing, or how the room was lit, or whether they are still there. I do not want to know, but I think someone someday ought to. Joshua Kane returned to Kentucky after the survey team's trip to Washington. He took up work as a farm laborer in Letcher County, the same county where the cave had been, and lived there for the remainder of his life. He never spoke publicly about the survey. He died in 1924 at age 65 of pneumonia. He was buried in a small Baptist cemetery near the town of Whitesburg, less than 10 miles from the sealed entrance to the cave system he had helped to survey. There is one document related to Cain's later life that bears on the cave story. It is a letter written in 1916 from Cain to his sister in Tennessee. The letter was preserved in his sister's family papers and was donated, with no particular fanfare, to the Tennessee Historical Society in 1956. It was not connected to the cave story at the time of donation because the cave story was not yet known in any public form. It was rediscovered by Daniel Trent in early 2024 after he learned of Cain's existence and began searching for any further documentation of his life. The letter is brief. The relevant portion reads, "I have been living within 10 miles of the place for 30 years now, and I have not gone back, and I do not intend to. I will tell you something I have not told you, because I do not see the harm in it now, and because I am getting to the age where I think these things ought to be said before they cannot be said. The reason I came back to Letcher County after the survey was finished was not that I liked the work or the people. It was that I wanted to know if anyone else ever came out of that cave. I have watched that hill for 30 years. I have watched the seals on the entrance. I have watched the men who come every few years from the government to check on the perimeter. I have not in 30 years seen any indication that anything has come out. Whether that means nothing has tried, or whether it means the seal is holding, I cannot say. But I will tell you that I sleep better knowing that whatever I saw down there is still down there than I would sleep if I lived somewhere else and did not know." The letter ends there. There is no further mention of the cave in any of Cain's surviving correspondence. He watched the hill for 30 years. He watched the seals. He stayed in Letcher County, working as a farmhand within 10 miles of the chamber and its lit room and the dozen or more figures he had seen standing facing a wall in the spring of 1885. And he watched. He died in 1924, having seen no indication that the seal had been broken. That, presumably, was the closest thing to peace he was able to achieve. Wendell Marsh continued his career as a geologist for another 15 years before retiring to Louisville. He died in 1908. His professional papers were donated to the University of Louisville, where they remain. They contain no further mention of the Putnam expedition. Samuel Whitfield, as noted, died in 1907. His personal effects were claimed by a brother in Tennessee. Whether they contained any further documentation of what he had seen in the cave is not known. Dr. Theodore Putnam outlived all three of his subordinates. He continued to operate the Putnam Geological Survey Company until his retirement in 1899. He died in 1912 at age 85 in Louisville. His personal papers, donated to the University of Louisville along with Marsh's, contain a single brief reference to the Letcher County Survey, a note in his appointment calendar for May 2nd, 1885, the day the classification order came down. Let the matter be resolved, funds released. No further action required. Whatever Putnam knew about the chamber, the bones, the symbols on the walls, and the things in the lit room beyond, he kept to himself for the remaining 27 years of his life. He never spoke about it. He never wrote about it in any document that survived. The cave is still sealed. The fence is still there. The signs are still posted. The federal designation of the site as restricted has been maintained continuously since 1885. In 2024, Daniel Trent, the researcher who had recovered Cain's account from the estate sale in Lexington, submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Department of the Interior asking for the release of the original Putnam survey report and any related documentation. The request was denied. The denial cited the original 1885 classification order. It noted that the order had not been revisited in subsequent administrative reviews. It indicated that any future review would require a formal interagency process that was not currently scheduled. Trent appealed the denial. The appeal is pending. In the course of his research, Trent also obtained, through public records requests, the maintenance logs for the federal property on which the cave is located. The logs are routine. They record visits by Department of the Interior personnel to the site at intervals never more than 5 years apart and usually closer to 2 or 3 years. The logs document the condition of the perimeter fence, the condition of the warning signs, and the condition of the stone seal at the cave entrance. They do not document what is being watched for, or why the watching has continued for so long, or who originally decided that it should continue. The most recent maintenance visit was in May of 2023. The log entry for that visit reads in its entirety: perimeter fence intact, signage in good condition. Seal at primary entrance shows no evidence of disturbance. No further action recommended at this time. Next review scheduled for 2026. 3 federal employees in 2026 will visit a hill in Letcher County, Kentucky. They will check the fence. They will check the signs. They will check the stone wall that has been sealed across the cave entrance for 141 years. They will note that nothing has changed. They will recommend the next review for sometime in the late 2020s, and they will go home. This will continue, presumably, for as long as the United States government continues to exist, or for as long as whoever or whatever is on the other side of the seal continues to exist. Whichever ends first. The chamber, if it still exists in the same condition the survey team described, still has its bone, meal floor, its wall carvings, its passage descending to the lit room beyond. The carvings, if Whitfield's observation was correct, may have continued to accumulate in the years since 1885, added to by hands whose owners have not been identified, and whose work has, by federal order, been prevented from being studied. The things Kane saw in the lit room, whatever they were facing the wall when he left. They were facing the wall when the survey team left the cave for the last time on April 17, 1885. They were facing the wall when the Army Corps of Engineers sealed the cave in July of that year. Whether they are still facing the wall now, 140 years later, is not a question that anyone with the authority to investigate has been willing to ask. The federal government has known since 1885 that there is something in a cave in Letcher County, Kentucky. That does not fit any known category. It has known this since the day the Putnam survey team emerged from the ground and reported what they had found, and its response in 1885 and in every year since has been the same: de-seal the cave, maintain the perimeter, classify the report. Do not under any circumstances look at what is inside. That is the official position. It has been the official position for 140 years. What is inside has been waiting, undisturbed, for that entire time. It is still waiting.